The Laying of the PackenHam Ghost. PackenHam Ghost. It was in the days when Parson Andrews was a young curate that the PackenHam ghost began to walk. It was a very common or garden type of ghost, so ordinary, in fact, that nobody even knew who it was. But it haunted a farmhouse near Pakenham in Suffolk, and a great nuisance it made of itself. Excuse me. It was a noisy ghost. It banged and thumped and slammed doors. The farmer and wife would hear its hollow groans overhead, always when they were getting just off to sleep. It bounced off the dresser and smashed it onto the floor. The farmer's wife, who was a good-natured woman, had a kindness for the ghost. "Poor thing," she said. "Wouldn't you feel sorry for yourself, flapping around in a sheet with never a bite to keep out the cold?" But the farmer, who was a harder case, said it only got its just deserts. "Stands to reason," he said. "It must have done something wrong during its life to get itself ghosted." Well, the farmer's wife ruled in the household, however, and she decided to cure the ghost with kindness. "Make it feel at home," she explained. "Then it wouldn't need to go racketing around waking people up." So she took to laying a knife and fork for it at every meal and chatting to it about the weather. The rest of the household didn't fancy the idea at all. The plowboy said it gave him the willies, not knowing whether anything was there or not. And the farmer reckoned his pudding never lay easy. But it did seem to do the trick. For a time it looked as if the ghost was settling down. Then the effort got too much for it. After a month or two of best behavior, it started getting up to its old tricks again. And this time the farmer put his foot down. "I'm not having another broken night, whatever you say, Mother. That ghost's got to go." So he sent for the parson to get rid of it, and the parson turned up carrying a bell, book, and candle, and bringing with him his curate, the young Mr. Andrews. He was as downy as a day-old chick, that Mr. Andrews, and he'd never seen a ghost, let alone laid one. "Now then," said old Parson Clegg, "it's all very well reading the thing down, but where are you going to put it after that?" "Put it?" said the farmer blankly. "Well, of course, I can't shrink it down for you, but it doesn't seem to get rid of it altogether. We need a place for it, somewhere it can't get out of." He paused, and seeing the farmer still uncertain, added, "The usual place is a bottle." "Ah," said the farmer, his face clearing. "Well, I should think I could—" "Oh, no, you don't. I'm not having that poor thing squashed up in any old bottle," said his wife, interrupting. "No, if you've got to be rid of it, and I think it's a pity, then it can go in the spare room wardrobe. It's nice and roomy." "But I keep my Sunday best in there," protested the farmer. "Ah, for shame," said his wife. "Grudging the poor creature a decent home, the cupboard it shall be." With that settled, the laying began. They had a hard time with that ghost. It liked the farmhouse and having its own knife and fork, and it didn't want to go. And Parson Clegg rode till his voice was hoarse, and the young curate spinning round like a teetotum, lighting candles and putting them out, and ringing bells and swinging dishes of sweet-smelling herbs. But the old parson had read down lots of ghosts in his time, and before the day was out, he got it shrunk to the size of a field mouse, and laid it proper in the cupboard with the key on the outside. The farmer papered the door over neatly, yet scarcely knew it was there, and nothing was heard of the ghost for a long time. Years went by, and the house changed hands. A new couple took it over, who came from Norfolk. Nobody told them about the ghost, because they were a nice young couple, and nobody wanted to bother them. But one day, as the wife, Alice Wilcox, her name was, dusted out the bedroom, she happened to notice a bump in the wallpaper. And that was where the key stuck out. In fact, she didn't even know that. She called one of the maids who had been there in the old farmer's time and asked what it was. "Ah, cupboard man," said the maid unwillingly. "Well, I never," said Alice. "Help me pull off this wallpaper then." "No," said the maid. "I wouldn't do that." "Why ever not?" Alice was stripping off the paper. As soon as she spoke, and she found the lock. "Don't! Leave it alone!" But Alice had got the key free, and she was turning it. "There is a ghost, ma'am." A ghost? What nonsense! But as she spoke, she opened the door, and a whoosh of blast of freezing air, and the ghost got out. A cloud of mist formed in the air and whirled, and it went streaking upstairs. There was a furious banging and a crash, and it down. He was back in business. This is somewhat of a cold read. "Come quick," he panted. "The ghost's got out, and it's breaking up the house," said the ploughman to the vicarage. Oh wait, let's back it up. Down flew the ploughman to the vicarage to root out the parson. "Come quick, the ghost got out, and it's breaking up your house." Well, the young curate Andrews, who is now Parson Andrews, and quite a few years older, sighed. He remembered that long, hard day with the bells and the candles, but he got his things together and ran. The ghost was bashing about in the attic, and the dairy maid was having hysterics. There wasn't a piece of china left in the house. "Put it back!" cried Alice Wilcox. "It's gone mad!" And the ghost let out a howl like a banshee, and Parson Andrews gritted his teeth. "Back into the cupboard?" he asked wearily. "No, not there. It'll only get out again. And I must say, it was a very pretty silly place to put a ghost in the first place. Just asking for trouble." "I did hear tell," put in the maid, "of a ghost being locked up in a clock once. Now, we've got that old grandfather clock down the hall, and it's never gone right since the old farmer knocked it over." "Ah, the very thing. I'll put it in the pendulum," said Parson Andrews. "Yes," said Alice Wilcox, "and before you know it, someone will come along and open it up. No, you take the pendulum, and we'll put it somewhere safe." "Down the well," said Parson Andrews. "Now, may I begin?" And so the ghost was laid, and Parson Andrews wrestled with it all afternoon, and as night was falling, the ghost gave a final howl and squeezed into the pendulum slick as butter. And then they took it and dropped it right to the bottom of that well, and put the cover on the well and a stone on top of that. "If it gets out of that now, I'll eat my hat," said Parson Andrews. And time passed. Alice Wilcox grew tired of farming with the mud and the pigs and that ghost down the well. So she and her husband went back to Norfolk, and they sold the farm to old Mr. Greenman, who'd had his eye on it for quite a few years. He knew all about the ghost, of course, but he rented it out to a man named Bateson, and he didn't let on. Before Bateson had been in a month, he decided to drag the well. Oh, you'd be surprised at the things you'd find down there. He found a rusty tea kettle, 2 other buckets, a half a dozen bed springs, and the last of all, a metal object that looked suspiciously like a pendulum. And that pleased him very much, because he'd noticed the clock in the hallway didn't work. This had annoyed him. So he took it back, cleaned up the pendulum, and hung it inside the clock again, and he gave the screw a couple of turns and set it going. And there was a groan of rusty cogs creaking into action, and the clock gave one slow, heavy tick, and then a swoop and a cloud of smoke, and the ghost was out of the clock and racing through the kitchen. There was a rattle and a violent cry before Bateson had known what hit him. The ghost was back. He couldn't make head nor tail of it. Nobody told him the house was haunted, but he was no man's fool, and he had the stable laid out, down to the vicarage, before, you could say, Jack Robinson. Old Parson Andrews was shaky now and rather deaf, but he didn't need telling twice. Not where the ghost was concerned. "Ah, this is too much," he said. "Sheer carelessness. Am I to spend the rest of my days bundling that ghost back into captivity, and where am I to put it this time? In a cheesecloth, I suppose. Or perhaps your master would prefer the 4-poster? "Dunno, sir," said the stable lad woodenly. "Very well, but I warn you, boy, this is the last time." He hobbled down to the farm, clutching his bell, book, and candle. The ghost was racketing about in the kitchen, and old Parson fairly let fly at it. "Hold your peace, sir, and if you haven't caused enough trouble for you already. And as for you, farmer, I must say you'd have done better to leave things alone. Still, it's no good crying over spilt milk. We can put it down the well again, but if I do, I want it sealed up proper. I can't go through this performance again." "Oh, I'll seal it up, sir," said Bateson grimly. "I'll block the well with a good solid stone, and that's a promise." Good, said Parson Andrews the elder, and he rounded on the ghost. He hunted it through the house and trapped it in a corner, then drove it backward, step by step, until it was hard up against the well. It didn't stand a chance. The parson was in such a fury that he could have tackled the hild... Let's try that again. The parson was in such a fury he could have tackled the wild hunt single-handedly. We do that again. Ha! The elder parson was in such a fury he could have tackled the wild hunt single-handedly. He got it into the well in 10 minutes flat. There was a bad-tempered yelp, and the ghost was gone. I'll leave it in your hands, said Bateson, but if you take my advice, use mortar, good and thick. But in the end, Bateson did better. He filled in the well, and he promised, and he built a summer house on top of that. It was a funny summer hook... It was a funny-looking summer house because the walls were 6 foot thick and the door was triple bolted. But it will stand till Judgment Day, he said, and as for getting out, I'd like to see the varmint try. But it never did. Not so far, anyway. But if you happen to be round PackenHam Way and come across a very solid summer house, you just might want to watch your step. From the book Ghost and Boggles, The Land of the PackenHam Ghost.